everybody's here. Before we begin the meeting, on behalf of the board, I want to thank KUB Crews. I was over there speaking to everyone, and one word that came out was they are awesome. And the board thinks that they are very awesome, and we want to thank them for their hard work. I think they were working 16 hours, 8 off, 16 for about 3 days straight in the elements. So I just wanted to let them know that the board, we really appreciate that. Thank you. If we can go ahead, I want to call the meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Here.
Commissioner Herbert?
Here.
Commissioner Pinnell?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Commissioner Warden?
Here.
We have 100% attendance.
And everyone should have received a copy of the minutes. Can I ask for approval of the minutes as sent?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Sorry about that. All right, I want to start in the official action of Resolution 1324, adapting amended bylaws of the Knoxville Utility Board, and hereby revoking and replacing all previous bylaws or amendments thereto. I want to recognize Samantha.
Commissioners, before I get to that, let me explain. The audience is a little bare today because a lot of our folks are actively involved in the restoration effort. So the ones that aren't out there actually working are asleep because they worked all night last night. So many of them aren't here, but don't think they're laying off. They're really not. They're doing a great job, and we appreciate your comments with regard to our staff. Last month, you had a full presentation on the amendments to the bylaws. I'll recognize Elba just to remind you what that was and request your official action.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As you all will recall, we worked with staff and with former Chair Anderson and General Counsel Bill Coley to review and recommend changes to the existing bylaws. As Ms. Roach has mentioned, those changes were presented at last month's meeting in accordance with Article 12 of the existing bylaws, which require any changes to the bylaws be presented in a separate meeting and that in which they are adopted. As you probably recall from that meeting as well, is that most of those changes were housekeeping in nature. And some examples include the fact that regular meeting notices are able to be presented electronically as they are today, as well as the fact that committee chairs can execute not only minutes but resolutions as well. We also included some new items. The order of business was updated to now have an official action section and a President's Report section, as well as updating the Audit and Finance Committee responsibilities. And that included adding the oversight of the OPEB plan, as well as looking and reviewing the competitive exceptions bidding reports, the active improper conduct reports, and other state mandated reports. You all received a full copy of the amended bylaws with your packet on Friday and is included in your packet today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have related to the bylaw changes. There are no changes, then we ask the board to adopt Resolution 1324, amending and adopting the new proposed bylaws.
Request a motion?
Move to adopt Resolution 1324. Second.
Is there anyone that needs to speak on this motion? If not, Mr. Coley, could you please do roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert?
Aye.
Commissioner Pinnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
And Commissioner Warden.
Aye.
Resolution 1324 has passed.
And next, we're going to go on to Resolution 1325, requesting City Council approval for refund bonds on the electric, gas, water, and wastewater divisions. I recognize Samantha.
I'll recognize Jamie Davis, who's going to give you a summary of the good news that we have with regard to our opportunities for refinancing.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Indeed, Commissioners, we are pleased and excited to let you know about an opportunity we have to save our customers some money, and we will propose doing that through refunding some of our existing revenue bonds. We're here today to request authority to refund about $209.7 million in refunding bonds. Those bonds were issued from 2005 to 2009 in recent history across all 4 of our systems. And even though interest rates have been, as we all know, historically low for some time now, and 2005 and 2009 doesn't seem too far in the rearview mirror, actually, as we sit today, the municipal bond market is even lower. And as such, we, through that refinancing and taking advantage of those interest savings, can save our customers approximately $15.2 million. And that's a good thing. Through that refunding, the maturities will not be extended. The life of that debt stays as originally issued, so we're not extending that life or stretching that out. And actually note the market is so good that we propose that the issues, the new debt issues that we have currently in our funding plan scheduled for this fall, we'll bring them forward for consideration actually at next month's March board meeting, and we'll talk more in detail about that as well too then. Per statute, we are required to share our refunding plans and analysis with the state comptroller. We've done that. We've received their feedback. We have provided that feedback also with the detail of the refunding plans to you in your packets. And we intend to share that with the city council as well when we go seek their authority. As with all of our debt, we do require, it does require city council authority and to issue that debt, and we will be getting on council's agenda upon approval today at the next city council meeting to get that approval so that we can go to bond sale sometime in mid-March to late March. So as we look at kind of an overall view of what we're proposing to refund, again, $209.7 million. We propose to refund in the 4 divisions. You'll see how we're able to kind of save that money based upon our current bond rates versus what are proposed. Depending on the division and structure of that rate, we're looking at anywhere from a 1% to 2% decline in that interest rate. That equates to, again, that approximate $15.2 million savings. It costs us a little money to issue the bonds, and that's right at $900,000, and we'll talk a little more in detail about what that is in just a second. So breaking down the divisions, $140 million of wastewater. Again, a projected total savings on the debt service over the life of those bonds, about $10.7 million. Again, that maturity doesn't extend. The original issuance was going to mature in 2042. These will as well. And because of the restructuring of that debt, the average life of the maturity inside the debt issue is reducing from 18.4 to 17.8 years. And you can see that structure in the chart on the right. For electric, $32.5 million with projected savings of $1.5 million. Again, those particular bonds will mature in 2030, and the average life will be reduced from 9.7 to 9 inside that, and you can see the structure on the right as well. For water, $24.5 million, a projected $1.9 million savings, full maturity in 2033, and the life of those bonds will be reduced from 12.4 to 11.7, and the structure on the right there as well. And then finally for gas, $12.9 million with approximately $1.1 million in savings. They will fully mature in 2031 and will reduce that life from 10.2 to 9.6, and also the structure on the right there. Now, I mentioned cost a few minutes ago. You can see how that breaks down to total out of that almost $900,000, or just over $900,000. The majority of that expense going to our financial advisor and our bond counsel. Come with the securities as our financial advisor and our bond counsels, Bassbury and Sims. And then for the 2 rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, which is required as part of the refunding as well. And then you'll notice the other minor administrative expenses for our paying agents, for advertising, accounting, the official statements, so forth and so on. So as we look at the resolution that we'll present to City Council, there are a lot of detail about the bonds inside of that, but some key provisions inside of that. It requests their authority to collectively authorize the issuance of those revenue refunding bonds in the total amount of $209.7 million in revenue refunding bonds. Again, those bonds are always secured by the issuing system's revenues. That's how they're collateralized. Inside that document, the final maturity date is prescribed. So as you all approve this and as they approve that, that's set in stone as part of that resolution as well. And also, since this is an advanced refunding, this requires an escrow agreement as well, and that's part of the resolutions that you will consider in City Council as well. So again, Commissioners, for your consideration is Resolution 1325, which requests Council to authorize the issuance of those revenue bonds. And the resolution that you're going to consider today does also include all those provisions that City Council will as well too. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you all may have.
Anybody have any questions?
Just a comment that this is one of the really nice things or good things or appropriate things that staff does. It'd be nice if media was here today so they could talk about the nice things you all do for the community. So it is a good, it's obviously a great business to see.
Jamie, I had one question also. When you say that the rate, they're down, did we see it rise and it came back down, or are we just?
Well, the market will always fluctuate, but I would have told you in times past, it can go only perhaps up at that point in time, but it's just continued to kind of that steady decline down. And I think even we were looking this morning, and even from this analysis and where it was prepared, the current market is even lower than where we initially had seen. So if I could tell you where the bottom was, I'd go,
There was a slight uptick last fall, and you may recall we actually accelerated the issuance of the bonds in the fall because rates were starting to go up. But since then, it has begun to come back down and down and down, and it is close to a 50-year low in the municipal bond market. You really have to go back to the mid-1960s. So it is a good time from that perspective.
If there's no other questions, request a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 1325.
Second.
There's no one there to speak on it. If we don't have Mr. Coley to call the roll, please.
Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell,
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Warden.
Aye.
Resolution 1325 is passed.
I'll recognize members for the president's report.
Commissioners, I'm going to take you back to last fall, and you had 3 different presentations, 3 different months about the strategic projects that we had been working on for really 12 to 18 months. We told you at that time that we had developed these strategies, but it would all be contingent on funding it. We got good feedback from you about each of those projects, but again, did not ask for anything beyond your indication that you supported them, because we were going to come back to you with financial impacts of them. Today, Mark Walker will review the financial impacts of those projects and the way we intend to fund them. The reason for that is we would like to get your feedback to that so we can incorporate it into the financial workshop in April if you all approve this approach. So keep that in mind as we're going through today, that this is leading up to our developing our financial funding.
Commissioners, as Ms. Roach stated, I guess beginning last September, we had teams of vice presidents and managers come before the board and actually present detailed recommendations on the respective strategic initiatives, which are listed on the chart here. Just as a quick reminder of the initiatives, one is the deployment of smart meters and other smart grid technologies beyond the pilot project area that we've had for the last several years. The second one was exploring whether to invest in redundant water system facilities with the aim of ensuring that we can continue to provide high-quality, reliable water supply to our customers, really focusing on capacity at our treatment plant. And the question of whether to build a second plant or invest in redundant facilities located adjacent to MBW. And then the third is workforce mix, and you can see it says contractors versus employees, but we had a team that basically went out and assessed those areas of the company where we rely more heavily on contractors to do the work as opposed to KUB employees, and does that mix between contractor and employee need to change, and for what reasons? So those recommendations on each of those were given in detail, I guess in September, October, December board meetings respectively. Today I'm just going to provide a high-level overview of those recommendations, and we're going to talk more about the financial impact on our funding plans and how we would propose to pay for them. Starting out, I'd just like to remind you of our financial strategy and some of the key elements contained in that strategy and how we carry it out on a daily basis. But just as a reminder, our financial strategy is really designed to support the vision of KUB, and that is to fund utility systems that will be safe, reliable, and affordable for our customers, while maintaining the long-term financial soundness of each utility system. One of the key components of that is cost management. We talk a lot about that, but it is very important because being able to find ways to do things cheaper in our jobs and more efficiently saves money for our customers, helps keep our rates lower than otherwise. Another significant component is debt, and using debt at appropriate levels, consistent with guidelines that have been set in consultation with our board, is also an important part of our funding, our financial strategy. And we think it's appropriate to use debt in certain levels because the system assets that debt is going to pay for are relatively long-lived assets, whether it's poles, those assets have a lifetime extending beyond 50 years, some close to 100 years. So both current and future customers are going to get the benefit of those assets. We think it makes sense within certain levels for both current and future customers to pay for those assets. Debt allows for that to happen. The third bullet, generating cash to fund operations, just to let you know, we have to have the system revenues in place that can cover our annual operating costs and also a portion of our capital program. So what debt won't fund, we need enough system revenue to make up the difference. And as you know, we have a 10-year funding plan for each of our utility systems that the board has endorsed by resolution, which allows us to fund our Century 2 operating capital programs over 10 years. That has a combination of modest annual rate increases and debt in that. So I know you all know that, but just sort of a brief synopsis. We'll talk in a few minutes about the details of the proposed initiatives and how we would finance it. This is just sort of a 30,000-foot look at that. First and foremost, the rate increases that the board adopted last spring for electric, gas, water, and wastewater, there will be no change to those. We're not going to recommend or propose any change to those rate increases. However, with rate increases that we have in our funding plans beginning in fiscal year 2018 and onward for electric and water, we will need to adjust those up a little bit to be able to pay for the cost of these initiatives. That's electric and water. Also, we will propose to use, like we have talked about, use of debt. There will be debt recommended to help fund the capital portion of the capital cost of these initiatives as well. And really, it's just a continuation of our strategy that with these initiatives, which I'll tell you right now have a total price tag impact to the plans of about $130 million over 10 years, that it will be a combination of incremental rate increases and debt to help pay for it. Real quickly, a brief overview of the three initiatives. Again, smart grid deployment. The recommendation made to the board was to deploy smart meters and other smart grid technologies across the entire system territory for electric, gas, and water. It's intended to be a phased-in implementation, really over a 10-year period. The key components of that, a 4-year deployment for electric, gas, and water meters. There's a total price tag of that of $52 million. Also included is a 10-year program to continue to connect fiber to all of our electric substations and other critical utility system infrastructure. The price tag on that component is $35 million over 10 years. And then the third component is really an ongoing, we've been doing this in the pilot phase and been doing it in other areas of our system, but an ongoing installation of what we may have heard of faulted circuit indicators, smart switches, voltage control devices, basically to help us real-time troubleshoot problems on our electric system, and that we can get people back in service sooner than otherwise. So those are invaluable. We'll continue to deploy those, and that will just be ongoing on a strategic basis over the next 10 years as well. The price tag for that is $11 million. The total price tag you can see is $103 million. It's 52, 35, and 11. If you can add that up in your head real quick, that's $98 million. There's an additional $5 million that we're going to have. We've put in the $103 million for administrative support, actually 6 new staffing positions to help support the deployment of the meters and the other technologies over the course of the 10-year period. Now, with the deployment of meters, as you know right now, we have a contractor that goes out and reads our meters a certain route every day. With smart meters, all that reading will be done remotely, so we won't have to need a contractor to go out and perform that service for us. So we're going to have a decent amount of savings from not having to do that. That's not factored in the $103 million. Over 10 years, that's going to be a $29 million savings. Once we get all the meters deployed, I think it's a little over $4 million per year once everything's in place that we will be able to save. So you would actually net that against the $103 million over the 10-year period, and that would bring that down, I guess, to around $74 million. For the water system initiative, again, we were really concerned with that initiative of reevaluating our long-term strategy for ensuring that we'll have reliable, high-quality water service in the future. Given the fact that we have a single water treatment plant, and given the fact that we're in an environment really every year of somewhat rising customer expectations with respect to reliability, we reassessed that strategy and basically evaluated whether or not do we need to invest dollars in providing redundant treatment plant capacity, either in constructing a new plant somewhere else on our water system, or actually investing in a series of capital projects that would basically provide a redundant treatment plant process at our current plant, adjacent to our current plant on Riverside Drive. The recommendation was to invest in the redundancy, the series of capital projects adjacent to MBW, and that would be done over a 15-year period at a total cost of $93 million. And just as to describe some of the projects, we currently have one intake off the Tennessee River at the Mark B. Whitaker Treatment Plant on Riverside Drive. Part of these projects would be actually developing 2 new intake points upstream of MBW, one on the Holston River, one on the French Broad River. The geographic position of the plant really helps us in that regard. So if for some reason there was a spill or something on the Tennessee River, we have other sources of water that we could bring upstream to the plant, either on Holston or French Broad. So that's a big advantage and helps basically to try to have a series of projects. That's one example that would create a redundant treatment train right outside of the plant at Riverside Drive. And we felt that that particular initiative met our reliability goals for the water system, but you can see the estimated cost if we were going to build a similar sized plant elsewhere on the system, $250 million. So we like 93 versus 250, it's about 1/3 of the cost of a complete new plant. And then on the workforce mix initiative, again, the team went out and looked at areas across the company where we rely heavily on outside contractors, including utility system operations and non-utility system operations. And basically, using a set of decision factors, determined that there were several areas that we're relying mostly on outside contractors, that it's in our long-term best interest if we get more of our KUB employees with that expertise and skill set. And some examples of what they recommended was for the water system, for hydrant and valve maintenance, for the electric system to increase our expertise in underground electric cable work, and also in working on the downtown electric network system as well. And for the gas system, it was being able to do gas capital construction work. Most of that has been contracted out over recent years. We need to increase our skill sets in certain areas and have that internally. That provides us with certain operational flexibility over the long term. So really the aim of those recommendations was to provide for having that critical knowledge and skill set internally. One of the good byproducts of that, though, is when we run the numbers over 10 years, it's actually a $10 million savings for KUB. So we'll take that any day. And we looked at a whole lot of different areas across the company. There were some, such as vegetation management, facilities maintenance, that we felt were not really in our utility core competency, and it's better for a contractor to do certain work as opposed to KUB employees. Any questions? Okay. Now we'll get into the financial really component of the presentation and look at each of the 3 initiatives and how they impact the system financial plans. And you'll see at the top, electric, water, and natural gas. There is no wastewater because none of these 3 initiatives really have a direct cost impact on the wastewater system. But you can see for the electric system, their share of the smart grid deployment is $78.5 million. Their share of the savings on workforce mix is 2.3. Total cost 76.2 over 10 years. And then their share of the $29 million in savings from not having to do the meter reading anymore over the 10-year period is 19.6. A net cash impact over 10 years of $57 million for the electric system. For the water system, one thing I want to point out, since this is looking at the impact on our 10-year financial plan, I mentioned that the total cost is $93 million. Over 10 years, the projects would just be $67.3 million. So just so you'll be mindful of the math there. But the water system share of smart grid deployment, the system redundancy, comes down to total cost of 79.5. You get your savings 75.2 for the water system. And for gas, it actually works out pretty good for the gas system. Their share of smart grid, workforce mix savings, then their contractor savings, they actually have virtually a wash, no financial impact to the gas system. So this is really these strategic initiatives are going to impact financially the electric and water systems. Total KUB, there's your $131 million. Okay, as far as our specific funding plans and how do things change, I'm showing it here based on our current plan for rate increases, and this is from a residential monthly bill perspective, and then also debt. And how do things change? This is the plan we showed you last spring. So you can see the dollar rate increases, no change on that from the electric customers. However, beginning in 2018, the increase that we said we would need last spring was $1.50, going 18 all the way through 24. At least for a 3-year period, that needs to increase to $1.75. So 25 cents higher on the monthly bill for those 3 years. That's the rate side of it. On debt, we're seeing you need an additional $48 million in bonds over the life of this 10-year plan to help fund the projects. And at that level, we'll continue to be within our guidelines that the board set for a debt ratio of 45%, and our debt coverage is still good at 3.16. So really a continuation of our financial strategy. We're not doing anything really new here, but just to show you that there would be a slight increase in the rate increases needed in the middle part of the 10 years. Any questions?
You might want to mention the TVA wholesale impact.
Yes, there is a footnote here, as you can see. That's a good point. TVA rates, they could impact this somehow as we flow those through automatically. TVA will have rate increases probably every other year, every 3 years over the course of this 10-year plan, so that could raise our customer bills as well. That is not reflected here. Yes, sir.
So what is the timetable for initiating all 3 of these projects?
The timetable as far as work actually beginning would be for the smart grid starting this fall. For the water system, it's actually staggered over 15 years. The major projects wouldn't begin for a year or 2 out. There would be some design work that would actually begin on some of the projects probably this coming fiscal year. For workforce mix, we're already starting to roll on some of those changes based upon the recommendations that's been said. For the water system, I believe we're already getting ready to try and hire folks to do the hydrant and valve maintenance, and we'll let that contractor go, I think, beginning this upcoming fiscal year. So they're in various stages, but the wheels have started to move on a couple of them. The biggest dollar impact in the next couple of years would be the smart grid one, in particular with those meters. That $52 million we'd spend over 4 years for the meter deployment, that would be first.
The reason we can go ahead and start moving on the workforce is because it's all savings. The other 2 projects have expenses, so we cannot move forward with those until after you all approve the financial plan and the budget.
So if we're not increasing anything up until fiscal year 18, are we going to be relying on bond issue to start that funding?
Yes. The bond issues would pay, the debt is going to be higher in those earlier years, in particular for electric, to help fund their share of the smart grid. That's correct. And the rate increases, you see this for water too, you would not take any official action on these rates until spring of 2017, based upon how we've done it in the past. So it's still a couple of years out before you would take official action on rates.
So we're at 16 and 17, we'll actually vote for the 18 through 20 at that point, or are we gonna vote, or is your recommendation to do, to 24?
It would just be to do that 3-year period.
The 3-year period. Okay.
Whatever the board's comfortable
Right.
with, but based upon our past practice, going back to 2011, the board's done it in 3-year increments. Yes, ma'am.
Mark, as far as debt issues and the target of 45% or less, where is the flexibility in planned debt versus unforeseen debt? You know, like a consent decree, which that wasn't anything you planned for to happen that quickly.
Correct.
How does that factor into this whole picture?
We would work with the board. This ratio here, for example, for electric 45%, that's something that's sort of been set in consultation with the board. And we even talked about maybe when Smart Grid actually came that we would elevate that 45%, which we could still do. We have flexibility with respect to that. What we really don't have flexibility with respect to is this right here, this 3.0. This is really set in conjunction with Standard & Poor's and Moody's. And if you want to maintain your bond rating, say AA+, you need to be pretty close to that and hit it more often than not. If we're going to have a funding plan that we said, we expect our average debt coverage to be 2.7 over the next 10 years, they're going to come back and say, fine, we're just going to lower your bond rating. You're a little bit more of a credit risk.
And how we handled it with the consent decree, since you referred to that, we had these plans that had to be changed. So we went back to the rating agencies and involved them in the plan changes and went ahead, and the board went ahead and passed two 50% rate increases at the same time that spread over 3 years. And the bond rating agencies were comfortable with the changes to the debt capacity because they could see that the rates had been increased to pay for that. So it all fits together, and it's in consultation, and we wouldn't do anything to jeopardize our rating. But they understand that, frankly, they don't mind how much debt you have as long as you have the money to pay it back with. And we demonstrated how we were going to pay the bonds back, and they supported that. So these plans are not designed for those major issues that arise. When those arise, we come back and revise the plan and get with the rating agencies and get with you, and we have a new plan. So we actually, at one time, debt in wastewater was 90%.
If we rewound the clock
Yeah.
and went back to 2002, and we're talking to the board, and this was a wastewater system, for example, this target would have been 30% or less. And 2 years later, it was 65% or less. So there is flexibility in adjusting that, but the key is, from the rating agency's perspective, is whatever that is for that system, you need to hit that more often than not. So again, everything sort of in balance. We couldn't just say, yeah, let's raise that to 60%, increase that to 350, and we'll leave the rates alone, and we'll all be good. Then that goes to like 2.0 or below, and you're in trouble. So balance. Okay. Water system, real quick, on the rate increases, again, 16 and 17 we'll leave alone, but we would anticipate that you would need to increase that residential monthly bill from $1.50 increase in 18 through 24, the back 7 years of the plan, to $2. So 50 cents increase on the residential monthly bill above and beyond what we had told you last spring. And then debt, $62 million more than what was in our current plan for the remainder of the 10 years. So a little bit heavier use of debt in the water system. But again, you can see we would be within our debt ratio and achieving our coverage as well. One other thing to point out, when we talked about these dollar numbers right here a few minutes ago, one thing that these don't include, this is the direct cost impact, but when you get to looking at the actual funding plans, those have an impact as well, as far as most of those expenditures are capital. I think the board knows that capital is a big factor in our in lieu of tax payments, so pilots go up as well. That has to be funded by the rates. And then also, if we're going to use debt, a portion of that's going to be paid back over this 10-year period of time, so your debt service is going to go up from what it was. So that goes into the rates as well. So if you were just saying, well, $75 million for water, 62's debt, only 13 from the rates, there are other cost factors that have to come out of those rate increases too, just so you're aware. Real quickly, gas funding plan, good news for that. No change in the rates because there wasn't a whole lot of dollars to be impacted on that. You might say, well, why are you issuing $5 million more in debt? It's for the reason I just mentioned. Most of that gas capital is going up, O&M's going down, there's your wash, but the capital influences the pilots. If you're going to leave the rates alone, you got to have something to make up the difference, and that's the $5 million in debt, which really doesn't make much of a difference on the plan. So, in summary, we believe what we've proposed to fund the initiatives is consistent with our past practice and does support KUB's vision and mission of safe, reliable, and affordable services. We'll point out to you that the budget, back to Bruce's question, that the budget that we'll present to you in May to be adopted for fiscal year 2016 will include maybe $11 to $12 million of the projects that we've talked about today. Most of that's going to be on the smart grid side for the meters and fiber. And then we are currently working through all our financial plans for all our departments and putting together the budget. We'll have a full presentation on that at our financial workshop in April. And we'll revisit all these 10-year funding plans as well. I don't anticipate these recommended or shown rate increases will change any. If anything, maybe be a little bit lower. That'd be great. But we'll see once we get all our pieces of the puzzle together. So, any more questions?
I can't remember when they made the presentation whether they talked about how the smart grid would be rolled out over 10 years. But at some point, can y'all give us a little refresher?
Sure, we
How
can do
that
that.
would